Hello, dear Val Verde Broadcasting. Duncan Casey here. Actor, producer, raconteur. I don't actually know what that means. But anyway, I'm just jumping on camera because everyone... Why do people say that? I'm not jumping on the camera. Let's not be literalist. Anyway, people have asked me my opinion on the recent announcement that Amazon Prime or Amazon in general are getting creative control of the Bond franchise. I'm going to discuss that in this video. We're going to talk about what I think that means for the series going forward, what my opinions are of that, how I feel about it, and we're going to open up the discussion to you guys as well. So if you have thoughts on the James Bond Amazon acquisition, if you like, or creative takeover, then please leave them down below. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get into it.
Val Verde Broadcasting.
So, obviously, the news broke, I think, last Thursday, so I'm just over a week. I think, has it been a week? I don't know. I lose track. I have small children. But, yes, it came as a bit of a bolt out of the blue. I gather that the same was true for those working at EON as well, that they didn't know that this was coming necessarily. Certainly, I guess those in Barbara Broccoli's inner sanctum probably did, but yeah, it's come, I think, as a bit of a shock to people. Firstly, you know, there's the gut reaction. There's the end of an era thing, right? Which is that, you know, these films since 1962 have always been produced by the same family, with the same kind of principles behind them. They've pushed the boat out and they've tested things, and it's not been too mired in tradition, but they have their traditional Bond tropes. There's certain things Bond should do, shouldn't do, all that stuff. They've been the custodian, not only sort of in terms of money. It comes from when Albert Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman got together. I think Saltzman had the rights and Cubby was, the creative guy, really. So they put their heads together and made Dr. No, which was a huge success. And then, of course, they went on From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, the rest is history. Until The Man with the Golden Gun, where Harry Saltzman had been getting into some financial trouble, had to sell his rights to the Bond series in order to pay off debts, and he sold them to MGM, or United Artists, I think it was at the time, who then became MGM and whatever. Or they were part of MGM. So what that's meant is that EON, who are the custodians of, they were the company Everything or Nothing, formed by Saltzman and Broccoli, who then obviously stayed under the purview of Broccoli, have always had to do a dance with MGM or whoever owns MGM in order to come to arrangements, but they have always retained creative control, whether it's with casting or story or whatever. They are in charge of that, whereas MGM, yes, have a say up until now, but wouldn't have the deciding vote, and they also were in charge of distribution, so they were distributors for it. I think Sony owned them at one point, which is why I think it's around Quantum of Solace, don't quote me. It was under a Sony banner. But yeah, it's been moved around. Been moved around a lot. You'll see United Artists across the front of some Bond films. You'll see MGM across more recent ones. What is it? Columbia? I can't remember. There's various idents that go on these movies because of the constant gerrymandering that goes on at MGM. Anyway, since No Time to Die, Amazon have now bought MGM for a vast quantity of money. I'm not sure what it was, but obviously the jewel in that crown was Bond, and they, I gather, have been having, been locking horns with EON over how to proceed next, and it's culminated in them handing over the reins to Amazon. It's hard as look. I said this when No Time to Die came out. I said this in private. I don't know if I said it anywhere publicly on a video or whatever, but I said that I thought No Time to Die represented the end of kind of James Bond for my era. I said it sort of, it felt to me like the end. But, even if it had stayed with Eon and we hadn't had this shift, I think they're going to cast someone younger than me. It's going to be the first time that a younger person has played James Bond, and it's going to go in a different direction for a different generation. And I thought my time had been, don't get me wrong, I'd check in on it from time to time, but I thought my era had kind of gone. It wouldn't be an aspirational thing for me anymore. And I was fine with that. I kind of thought, yeah, you know what? And it's a good way to end that, it's a conclusive way to end that, so that's fine. And that still holds. I mean, I think that whatever happens next, I think that still holds. Obviously, there's concerns that they will dilute the brand and they will do, spin-offs, Moneypenny TV series, Q TV series. My thoughts on spin-offs are that, look, Amazon's got form for taking TV like IPs and putting them in TV. I'm watching the new season of Reacher at the moment, and I think, it's no shade on Tom Cruise, but like the movies were great movies, but they weren't Reacher movies. And I think what they've done with the series is way more kind of in line with who Reacher is as a character, and it's been really authentically. I gather anyway, because I've not really read the books. My dad has. Shout out to you, Dad. I think you've read the Reacher books. But I think the series, the Amazon Prime series, is way more in line with what Reacher should be. So they've shown, that they can do that. I think it was the same thing with Jack Ryan. I think the Jack Ryan seasons, the last one wasn't so great, but certainly the first two were very, very well handled. And I gather they're doing a movie now. So they've got pedigree for doing great television and being really authentic and not, commodifying or corporatizing it too much. James Bond's always been corporate, by the way. It's always been they sell everything with it. We all know that, right? So it's kind of like that side of things, right? It might be a bit different because it will be Amazon's version of that, but it's still, I can't see that really changing an awful lot anyway. That said, I think, if you do, so look, they could do in an ideal world, they would do a spin-off TV series where it's period set and it's sort of the Bond books, but way more authentic to Ian Fleming, and you've therefore got however many, you've at least got 5, 8, whatever seasons of TV where it's, Casino Royale's the first one, then it's Live and Let Die, then it's Moonraker, and we just make those. And because it's now a TV show, you don't have that stigma of those movies having been made. Like Moonraker was a film, but like it wasn't that authentic to the novel, because I've read that novel and it's really not that authentic to it. Die Another Day is almost more authentic, kind of. There's other movies that are actually more of a authentic retelling of that story. But anyway, and you could do that as a series, and you could run that concurrently, I suppose, with the cinematic James Bond, who is kind of, they keep it going in kind of this is the trouble, isn't it? Because they wrote themselves into a corner with No Time to Die. It's obviously going to be rebooted, yes, but how? And how do you keep the stakes high when, you've shown that he can die on screen? Maybe it's time not to have movies for a while and make it a TV show and do the whole period thing and just let that run itself out, and then come back with movies later on down the line when you completely return it over. I don't know. I mean, these are things that just, I'm sure, are being discussed in many a focus group and boardroom at Amazon HQ, wherever that is. But I think the problem I have is that, yes, the Reacher show, for example, let's use Jack Reacher as an example, is a huge success at the moment. And from what I've seen of season 3 so far, really great. Like, really, really great. It's not permanent enough, though. It's not, these TV shows are great because, you get a season a year, basically, and then, they are what they are, but they are way more kind of in the zeitgeist. And I think Bond has always managed to transcend that. I mean, it's been of the time and yet not of the time. When you confine it to a TV show, I don't know that'll have the legs that it needs. That said, format hopping, as it were, might get us out of the whole having to reboot a film series situation, and might just be a good alternate lens to look at James Bond for the foreseeable. Now, of course, what they're up against is the fact that in 2035, I think it's Casino Royale comes into the public domain. So I guess that's an age thing. It's like it's going to be, 70... I guess or 80 years, or whatever, however old the book will be, it enters public domain, which means that anyone can do what they want with it, much in the same way that stuff has happened with Winnie the Pooh recently, where people have been making weird horror films and just, getting into it. So some people have been talking about that, the kind of the public domain thing. There's two things on that. Yes, obviously what it will then give people access to are all the characters in Casino Royale. Much in the same way that Kevin McClory had access to Thunderball and that story, he also had access to those characters. So he could, I think, go and make his own stories with those characters and he would still be within his rights, I think. I don't know, or maybe he could only make that story again. Not sure on that one. So people could go out and make Casino Royale the horror film, the sci-fi film, the comedy. Well, we've done that already. Not that it wasn't that funny. But they can go out and do what they want with that, and anyone can make their own James Bond film effectively at that point and exploit it. Because obviously at the moment anyone can make a James Bond film, but you can't make any money from it. The difference is, though, and much like with Never Say Never Again, yeah, you can, but you're going to have to come up with a whole new load of iconography. You'll need new music. You can't use the Monty Norman thing. You'll need new graphics, because all that is still, I guess, owned by Dan Jack. All the like 007 logo, the gun barrel, none of that. You can't use any of that. So yes, you can go and make your own James Bond film, but it's not going to feel like a James Bond film. So I don't think that's as big a gun to the head as people think it is. People are saying, in 10 years it's all going to be over because everyone will get access to it. I don't think so. It's not going to be like that, because they'll still have A, the back catalogue, and B, the copyright on all that material. And so, yeah, it's not the gun to the head that people think it is. Nevertheless, it does mean that certain decisions will have to be made as far as, what the brand is, what it's going to look like after that event. So they need to build up to that, I think, in some way. And that might mean that you can't do TV James Bond, movie James Bond. It might be that they really do have to distill what James Bond looks like for the next 10 years in order to ride that out. The thing is, of course, in that time, what's most likely to happen is that, assume they continue with the cinematic series, you're going to end up with someone cast, or various cast members, and in 10 years' time, those people might be aging out or moving on, and then they'll be needing to recast right at the time when they're going to be up against the rest of the world. I'm speculating that may not happen. The other thing to remember in all this is that EON are still co-owners. Barbara Broccoli is still involved, and will presumably have input. Now, she won't get to make final decision, but they will still be involved. They're not out of the picture altogether. And that's important to remember, I think, because there's been a lot made of like, oh, she's sold it out, she's got rid of it. I mean, I think you need to remember, she's in her 60s. Michael G. Wilson is 83, I think. He's in his 80s. They can't do it forever. I mean, much as I would love them to, and I, for better or worse, I think they have been, just amazing. I think they've generally made all the right choices, and where they've kind of taken bold steps and maybe missed the mark, I still appreciate that, because I would rather they were doing that than just playing it safe every time. So, they will be missed as far as all that's concerned, but they couldn't do it forever. And, in terms of succession, I suppose there's Greg Wilson, is it? That's, I guess, Michael G. Wilson's son. And I think they've got other kids who could take it on, but do they want to? Are they ready? It's a lot to shoulder. And I think, look, if that isn't going to happen, if that's not going to work out, then something like this had to happen. And, to sort of then embark upon a whole new era of James Bond by like recasting and sure, she could have said, all right, you know what, I'm gonna shepherd into the new era, the whole revamped thing. And I think she probably just took a look at that and went, so much work. I'm not going to see it out anyway. Or if I am, it's going to be another 10, 20 years of my life. Kids don't want it. Okay, time to let it go. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I'm speculating. I know that she saw it as really important, and it was her father's legacy. And this might be the best way to preserve it. I don't know. But, we live in hope. We'll see. As I say, for me personally, it was kind of over anyway. And that's cool. That's fine. Things end and new things start. And look, all this stuff is great, and I love James Bond, and I want it to thrive and continue and be there for another generation, of course. But I want new things as well. I want us to stop worrying about who's the next James Bond, who's the next whatever, and start putting more of our attention on what's new. What can we do that's new? What exciting characters and situations can we create that are new, that are modern, that are relevant, to where we are now, and stop fixating on what has been, because I think we end up in cul-de-sacs creatively a lot of the time, because we're hamstrung by the fact that something has to be a proven thing. I mean, the Bond films had got to the point where they were spending $300 million on them. And at that point, given that they started with a budget 300 times smaller than that, all right, I know adjusted for inflation, it's probably not like that, but you know what I mean. Dr. No was made for $1 million, and it was kind of, it's still quite a polished film. I think it still had all the, and Bond films weren't always that, they weren't mega budgeted, but they would always, they were always innovative and interesting, and even though they had a strict framework, they would always do something. There was always a hook in there somewhere. Even when you go up to the Brosnan era, you had all the the remote control cars and stuff like that, stuff that just subverted expectations. I think Sam Mendes said it well when he was talking about doing Spectre, and he said with sequels the trick is to make the familiar unfamiliar, and vice versa, to make the unfamiliar familiar. So it's all about playing with what has been and subverting expectations. I think personally, I would rather see, instead of a $300 million Bond movie, it would be much nicer to have six $50 million movies, or 12 $25 million movies, because you could do a lot with not a lot now. I mean, $25 million, I'll make you an amazing movie, right? So I'd rather see that. We're not going to see that, of course. It's an IP. It's got to be exploited. I understand that. And I guess it will be. So that's really all I have to say on that. If you're new to the channel, thank you very much for stopping by and listening to this incoherent ramble, let's be honest. If you aren't new to the channel, hi. good to see you again. Thank you for coming along and listening and watching and being part of our community. Please do leave us comments below. We do try to respond to them. We love you guys as a community because generally you're all very, very lovely and respectful and wonderful. And we know that this is a subject that you've probably all got a lot of opinions on. So please share them below. We'll interact with you. We do have a Patreon page. Please go over to Patreon. Find Val Verde Broadcasting over on Patreon. You can donate $1 and be part of our community over there. We'd love to have you. We post things early there at the moment, and we also have community chats and stuff over there, so please go check it out. We're going to keep trying to do what we do. It's hard to fit around family life and business and all that stuff, but we will keep trying to do it. So until next time, thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon.